their instinct when they come to investigate difficult matters is that they want to protect themselves first, rather than the public interest.
Last night, the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, met BBC executives to discuss what are described as her serious concerns about how the corporation handled the investigation. Let's speak to David Keighley, who's a former BBC PR executive and TV producer. Morning, David.
Good morning to you.
In your view, can you understand why the BBC didn't sack Huw Edwards, even when they knew the nature of the allegations against him when he'd been arrested?
Yes, and in some ways, although I wouldn't defend necessarily that action, but of course, these days, HR procedures, etc., are very complicated. So, and until recently, Huw Edwards was not guilty of anything. It's only when he appeared in court on Wednesday that we knew that it was the case. He'd admitted it. So due process has to be followed. But having said that, the BBC has got long form. I believe I've been monitoring the BBC professionally for 25 years in various ways, but they've got long form in not being transparent enough in what they put on record about what's going on. I think their instinct when they come to investigate difficult matters is that they want to protect themselves first, rather than the public interest. And I think this is playing out again here. Yeah, obviously, last year it wasn't certain till November that the serious charges were being pressed. But what we haven't had from the BBC is any indication of, and Tim Davies said yesterday that he wasn't going to release any internal documents about what sort of investigation they have done. And for example, they say he's one of the big issues is that he's got mental health issues. But have there been any reports from that, from psychotherapists or psychiatrists? We don't know. We don't know the depth of that. It's a question I think that the BBC really need to have a complaints procedure complaints procedures in place, and I think Lisa Nandy has said this last night, which are rigorous and again the word transparent. And we believe, from our perspective as a monitoring organisation, they should have an independent input rather than the BBC being its own judge and
Yeah.
jury.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? There are more claims in the Times today, and indeed the Sun, that a young TV producer was invited by Huw Edwards to his hotel room on the night of Prince Philip's funeral. Of course, social distancing rules were in place due to the pandemic. Claims first reported in The Sun, corroborated by BBC News. Lucy Manning, the BBC special correspondent, said last night that the claimant was in tears and felt let down by the corporation. She went on to say, I have to say, I don't think it's a great look that the BBC are not dealing with what went on in this newsroom that we all worked in. Another insider said that Edwards was known to have shared suggestive messages. It was certainly more than emoji love hearts and kisses, they say. Another employee claimed Huw Edwards would send similar invitations to others in the newsroom. The member of staff said, you wonder how many people he's done the same thing to. It looks like a pattern of behaviour is emerging from people who have been approached by Huw Edwards. I just wonder, when we're talking, and what obviously is different about the BBC versus other companies is this is public money. Should the BBC be releasing the details of that internal investigation to us, who have been paying Huw Edwards' salary whilst he was suspended, arrested on child abuse image charges?
Absolutely, I think that's a very important dimension of this. The BBC is publicly funded. It's a large, in terms of media penetration, it's the largest organisation in the UK and the most watched and listened to. So they've got an obligation to do that, and I think. Repeating to some extent what I said earlier, but it's just that their instinct is to protect themselves. They're not being transparent enough.
And is that to do with kind of untouchable talent, as it's called? Presenters are called talent in the media industry. And I just wonder if there is a sense that stars become so big that managers don't feel that if there is suggestion, discussion about inappropriate behaviour, is there a sense in the BBC that managers don't know how to approach stars, the people on the big salaries, who a lot of the time, the bizarre thing is in the BBC, that the stars are being paid a lot more than the bosses and have a lot more power.
Yes, and let's put into the frame that Huw Edwards was earning nearly £500,000 a year for his services. So I'm not sure what the DG is paid, but I think it may have even been more than he is paid. So there is that feeling of untouchableness. It's applied in Savile for many years. It applied with Martin Bashir for many years. And really they must be more rigorous and again the word transparent.
I wonder as well, Jeremy Vine, the Radio 2 presenter, said in his Channel 5 show yesterday, which I thought was really interesting. He was saying he wanted the BBC to clarify if bosses had asked Huw Edwards whether he was guilty when they learnt that he had been arrested back in November, because clearly if he said yes, then they could sack him there. If he said no, well, he was lying because he pleaded guilty in court. Does the BBC tiptoe around this? Is that a conversation the BBC would likely, in your experience, have had with a star?
Um, my experience is quite a while back directly at the BBC, although I monitored the BBC for many years. Yeah, there certainly was a culture when I was there that the stars could not be approached over certain issues. And again, that particularly applied around Jimmy Savile. So it's a dilemma that they have, that the stars have got disproportionate power. They're a major part of their brand, as it were. So it's hard to know at what point that matters become a disciplinary offence in certain respects. But again, it all comes back to this: they're protecting themselves. They're not really rigorous enough. They're not independent enough. One of the lines to appear this morning in the press, I think it was in the Mail, was that Vicky Finn, the wife of Huw Edwards, is a close associate with the chairman of the current new chairman of the BBC, Samaya Shah. Now, I'm not suggesting there's anything bad in that, but this is the point that they are investigating themselves, and these issues of whether or not they're protection and due protection of people we won't know about unless we've got a proper written report from them of what's gone on.
Comes back to transparency once again. David, thank you so much for your time this morning. David Keighley there, former BBC PR executive and TV producer. And clearly, anytime the BBC want to come on and talk to us about this, we would be very open to that.
Yes.